Okay. Give everybody a second to log in, but I want to go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to have a really wonderful webinar. I am so excited to have Hugo back and Kyle and our amazing partners with HMR, Fox-AE, and OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting. If you guys have any questions today, I want to make sure that you put them in the Q&A box. That way Kyle can kind of monitor them and we will ask them throughout the webinar so we can be all interactive. Let me go ahead and first start out by just thanking everybody again for joining us. And I'd like to go ahead and start out by introducing our amazing moderator. As you guys know, Kyle Kinberger, he is the Chief Revenue Officer for HMR. He also manages the sales operations around the country for the organization, and he currently oversees all the daily operations of business that's done in over 39 states. And they actually currently operate, all over the place, but the main home base is in Richmond, Virginia. Kyle is located in New Orleans, so if you guys happen to be coming to town, definitely reach out to him. He's also been with HMR since 2012, and he has been in the medical funding space for over 16 years. HMR has had the opportunity to fund several thousand cases with a primary concentration on funding TBI and catastrophic injury cases for plaintiffs who are uninsured. And as you guys know, John Romano, his entire firm loves working with HMR, and you're going to hear a little bit more about what they specialize in a little bit later on in the webinar. And then of course, we will bring in Ted to do their special coffee giveaway. So anyway, let's get started. We got a lot to talk about, and I hope you guys enjoy the webinar.
Thanks so much, Ginger. I appreciate it. We're really excited to kind of be back with everybody today. As many people know who kind of tune in, week out, a lot of the discussion centers around brain damage cases and TBI and all of the things that kind of go along with it. And for our part of it, in addition to the therapies and the actual cognitive rehab that we fund, a huge component of it is the advanced neuroimaging that we get requests to fund on various cases with people who have a suspected TBI. And so through those discussions, we were fortunate enough to be able to get in touch with Hugo, who has a tremendous amount of experience in the field. He does a ton of TBI cases around the country. And so we're excited to have him here. So I'll tell you a little bit about Hugo for those who haven't been able to tune in before, and then we'll turn the program over to him. As Ginger mentioned, I think the way that we like to do it is make this an interactive format. So if you have questions as Hugo is presenting, please drop them in the chat box. We'll pause the presentation and ask the questions so we can kind of keep an interactive dialogue going with Hugo, and then continue the program from there. So with that being said, for those of you who don't know Hugo, Chanez is a partner at the Mitchell Sanchez firm in New Orleans, Louisiana. He holds an LLM from Queen Mary University in London. He's practiced in the United Kingdom and United States. He's a fellow of the American Board of Trial Advocates at Harvard Law. He's a past member of the National Trial Lawyers Top 40 Under 40, and is a member of the America's Top 100 Stakes. As I mentioned, professionally, he has a national practice prosecuting traumatic brain injury cases in several states, including Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Colorado, and Illinois. His efforts have yielded several high-profile TBI cases, resulting in multi-million-dollar verdicts. Like I said, we're fortunate to have him here today, and the topic today is obviously going to be conflicting DTI scans, and he's also going to be covering how to defend Daubert challenges when they arise. So with that, Hugo, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Kyle. You're very kind as always. So let's start with this proposition. Seeing is believing. You have to see it to believe it. Or one of my favorites, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And it brings to the point that as humans, we're visual. mostly. And when we deal with mild traumatic brain injury cases, you have a client who looks fairly normal. He is not bedridden. He doesn't look disabled. So how do you prove to a jury that this person has a lifelong condition that affects every aspect of their life and will continue to do so for the future? And that is where the place of neuroimaging comes in. Now, it is the vogue to use DTI, diffusion tensor imaging. And the question that we get a lot of times in our discussions with Kyle has come up is lawyers say, it looks great, but how do I use it? How do I defend it? How do I get it in? And what are the conflicts that I'm going to deal with when I'm using it? So we kind of want to help walk people through these experiences. Hopefully by watching us, you will be involved in high dollar amount settlements and verdicts, and not in making case law like I have had to be involved before in defending and protecting DTI and getting its use in the courtroom. So I'm going to start the presentation. If you guys need me to stop and pause, have any questions, feel free to ask. All right. So we saw the basics, diffusion tensor imaging. And what you see here is the pretty little picture. It's also my background too, of what a diffusion tensor imaging scan looks like to a jury. It is this colorized, mohawk-looking pictures with the fibers extending from the brain. And here in this slide, you can see why we want to use it and why it's important to use it at trial, and the images it can convey to the jurors. So, example, this comes out of a case that I've had. I've blacked out all the sensitive information, but you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is what's called the abnormal DTI, and the right side is the normal. This shows to a jury the way the brain fibers should look and the way they look now on this patient. So even while they may look perfectly normal, like nothing is wrong with them, they may be healthy. I mean, they may look just like Kyle. If you show this scan, it's a look inside the brain as to what is happening with this person's fiber tracks. It is fantastic imagery. It is powerful. And it is going to convey to people that the person is really injured. It is a lot better than just having somebody say, I hit my head. Yeah, he's different. Yes, neuropsych testing is there. This shows you the actual structural damage to the brain itself. And when you can put these pictures in front of a jury and say, this is what it should look like a normal, this is what his looks like, it carries a very powerful message. And the beauty about it is there's a whole body of literature on DTI. So once you get DTI, you're able to bring it into trial. You're able to expose it to a jury. You can then say, look, the literature matches. Here are the, look at the side B. Here are the findings on the brain, and here's how it looks like on the DTI. So the question we always get is, well, what is DTI? And it's a whole new series of technology. And new is a very mild term because it has been around for quite some time now, but defense always calls it new. And again, this is what you want to be able to use for your trial. When you're presenting to a jury, these are the DTI images you want to be able to use. It shows the damage to the brain. It is no longer now a, he complains of this, he complains of that, headache, sensitivity to light. They say he's got this issue and that issue. Now, this is actually just as good as a back MRI or a neck MRI with a bulging disc. It's probably even better. You can see right there, there are brain fibers that are not colorized because they've been damaged. And now part of his brain is not functioning. This is a broken brain, if you want to call it that. And this is the kind of imagery that helps you win multi-million-dollar verdicts, start your cases for multi-million-dollar amounts. However, as exciting as it may be, you have to realize one thing. Because it's such powerful imagery, the defense is not going to want to let this into trial. And you're going to face obstacle after obstacle for them to try to exclude it. And again, remember, there's literature on this. The most famous article we have, all plaintiffs' lawyers use this, the Hugo L article. And it tells us that in more than 20 years of studying DTI, we can find good correlation between the findings on this imaging and the actual symptoms that the plaintiff has. And there is consensus on this. It is now scientific use. This is, again, powerful to the jury, but you're going to run into the problem of your defense lawyer. Why? If you're on the other side, the last thing you want a jury to see is that Mohawk picture. The last thing you want to see is that Hugo L article. It talks about, years upon years of research on DTI. So you are going to deal with every single kind of effort to exclude DTI. And I know when I have these conversations nationwide, plenty of people tell me, but DTI is accepted. And a lot of lawyers keep long lists and tell you which courthouse accepts it, which one doesn't. That's great. And for years, we thought the law had been resolved that DTI was accepted. And as a matter of course, like a back MRI, you could get it into trial. However, because of the high dollar verdicts that this causes and the importance it has at trial, you have seen every single time defense has come up with new and newer ways to try to challenge DTI's admissibility. Now, I think at some point, they're going to just challenge us on the DTI itself, just like with a back MRI, and say, have a neuroradiologist say, I don't see it that way, I see this. And we will say, no, our neuroradiologist will say, I see this on the film itself. But as of right now, the strategy is keep it out, say it's unscientific. And it's really a multi-tier strategy. The first defense is going to be unscientific. And the second one is, okay, maybe it's scientific and it is allowed, but the way it was done in this case, it should not be allowed. And they're going to come up with excuses. So the one thing you have to do is protect your DTI imaging and your scans ahead of time. You have to know from day one, you are going to be facing a challenge. And hopefully after you watch this, I will give you the tools and set you up in the right way so you know how to protect yourself and you make your DTI acceptable. Kyle, does somebody have a question?
Yeah, we do have a question. So the question is, when you have a mild TBI or a minor TBI, would it still look like this? Or does it have to be a moderate to severe to notice the large black areas of missing fibers?
That's actually a great question. So let's go back to this little mohawk thing. So the classification of mild, moderate, severe is really based on loss of consciousness. I think it's 0 to 20 or 30 minutes. It's mild. I think beyond that is going to be moderate, and then, severe loss of consciousness is severe TBI. Remember this, don't fall for the trap that a mild TBI means mild symptoms. There is plenty of literature that is going to tell you that even a mild TBI can have long-term permanent effects. We don't measure the TBI that's mild. That noun doesn't modify the severity of it. It just modifies the time the loss of consciousness on the TBI. So this image you see right here on your screens, that's a mild TBI. So absolutely.
So you also have you also had a follow-up question regarding neuroradiologists. Somebody asked, who are the best experts, specifically neuroradiologists, to use in getting a DTI scan? I know that could be a subjective type thing, but
Correct. And I'm going to touch a little bit on it as we go down, because you definitely want a neuroradiologist. Legally, can you admit DTI into evidence with a simple radiologist? Absolutely. It goes to the weight, not the admissibility of the evidence. But be careful, because your expert is going to be subject to a voracious cross-examination that made you put you in a bad spot. But to confirm, yeah, your mild TBI, and that's why the scan is so important. In your mild TBI, you can still have that kind of image findings. And of course, it's going to change on case to case.
Gotcha.
So regarding the best neuroradiologists to use, there's plenty of neuroradiologists around the country that do fantastic work. If anybody has seen these webinars before, know that I do a lot of work with Dr. Travis Snyder from Simon Med in Las Vegas. The Mindset Group in New Mexico does fantastic work as well. So that's my my take on it. It's less about the neuroradiologists per se, but the protocols they have, the experience they have, and we'll touch a little bit based on that as we go forward.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about the basics here. And I'm going to use the federal rules because it's a nationwide, kind of CLE presentation. So therefore, each state is going to pretty much model for the federal rules. Federal Rule of Evidence 702. For your witness to testify and your evidence to come in, it's going to be scientific, based on sufficient facts and data, reliable principles applied to the case. If you don't have these, you're going to get kicked out. And again, it goes to the cautious. There's a lot of people popping up nowadays who want to do DTI scans. If they don't have the right protocols, if they don't have the experience, if they don't do it right, you're going to see a Daubert challenge that is likely to be successful on there. I'm telling you from the start, you are going to see the Daubert challenge. You might as well prepare from the beginning. And that's why that's important. So after 702, we have this rule called the Daubert standard. And basically it's the collection of 3 opinions from the US Supreme Court: Daubert, General Electric, and Kumo. And those 3 combined are what's called the Daubert standard. So you're going to see 3 types of Daubert challenges. Experts qualifications. That goes back to your radiologist. If you're a radiologist, has he done DTI? Does he do it regularly? Does he understand DTI? Then the expert's methods. How was this DTI collected? And 3, the science relied upon by the expert. So let's take something that's very important. How do we get this Mohawk picture, this DTI stuff? Well, what you do is you do a brain scan. The brain scan includes a specific sequence. Some I've heard of some called SW1. This one is called DTI, diffusion tensor imaging. This sequence is then put onto a template, into a computer model. And there's 2 ways you can process it. You can process by what's called a hand tracing method or a template method. A neuroradiologist selects a region of interest. Basically, what part of the brain do you want me to study? And once that is done, the computer takes that area and generates what's called an FA value. You all want to be fancy, fractional anisotropy. Those FA values range between 0 and 1. And for years, we've always said, there's a body of literature saying, reduced FA values means that you now have a brain injury, because that means that the diffusion rate of water in your brain is not flowing properly. So the principle is this, and I'll give it to you in a wee snapshot. We can explain it easily to a judge or a jury, because at some point you're going to be in front of a judge trying to explain FA values. And let me tell you, judges do not understand this concept. The idea is this: if you put water randomly in a cup, it goes in all different directions. If you put a straw, it tends to flow towards the straw. So principle behind DTI is this: there's little fibers in the brain. The water in the brain is going to flow around those fibers at a specific rate. If it's not, it means the fibers are damaged. And that is traditionally what you see with the low FA values. When it comes to your expert's methods, the question is going to be, how was this data collected? And I will tell you this, even though that is probably the most hardworking part of doing a right DTI, it is what is going to save your DTI every single time. So I want to keep you abreast of this. There are changes being made to the federal rules of evidence. They are adding things. And they're basically going to add that the proponent has demonstrated by a preponderance of the evidence all the elements of admissibility. So up to now, there has been a debate in some division within the courts, whether is it the party challenging the DTI that's got to prove that it's unreliable, or is it the party that was bringing forward DTI that's got to prove it's reliable? I believe the new amendments make it clear. It is our burden and our job to make sure that we read all the elements of 702 of Daubert and that we prove that our evidence is scientifically admissible. I don't think we can rely anymore on the fact it's their motion, judge, their burden, they didn't prove it to you. And here's the second part of the amendments. Experts' opinion must reflect a reliable application of the principles and methods, the facts of the case. This is going to be critical, and it's going to be a huge fight coming up in the future. And the reason is there is a growing body of literature and defense societies that have said that DTI is okay for a group study, not for an individual. And that is what has become the vogue when trying to exclude DTI. Yes, it's been around for years. Yes, there's tons of literature. Yes, there's studies about it. Yes, great for research. But it's for group studies, not the individual. So you have to be aware. I don't know if this law's change has been approved yet or not. If not, I can almost guarantee you it is coming. So what do you do to get your Daubert evidence in? How do you meet it? It's 5 steps. You got to prove that the theory or technique in question can be and has been tested. Well, luckily, we have about 20, 30 years of peer-reviewed literature on DTI. Second, whether it has been subject to peer review and publication. We have that already too. Known or potential error rate. That is going to depend on your neuroradiologist and how the DTI was collected. And by the way, that also goes to number one, the technique as well. 4, the existence and means of standards controlling its operations. Again, it's what I said earlier. There's a lot of players that pop up and want to do DTI, and they advertise. They want to charge you a lot of money for it. Well, if they don't have the right controls, if they don't have the right procedures for doing DTI, you are going to run into a problem, because the defense is going to go back and point out to that number 4 factor in Daubert and say, Judge, I understand there's a body of literature that allows DTI. We get that, but it's their burden to get it in. And by the way, they can't meet element number 4. So make sure you know what those parameters are, you know what those control groups are, and what the process is, and make sure you get that evidence in early on, because that's going to save your DTI. And 5, whether it has attracted widespread acceptance within the relevant scientific community. There is acceptance. And again, now they're going to need the sleight of hand by defense saying, Judge, accepted for group studies, not for individual studies. Just kind of.
So, I mean, there was a question that popped up earlier, and somebody had referenced, how do you get your DTI into evidence? And I know you've kind of been addressing that right now. He's saying he's had a hard time getting his, getting the MRI in.
Correct. So, and I guess for clarification points, is it in a trial? You're going through with your neuroradiologist, most likely, who's going to be Dr. Such and Such, who, oversaw the scan, tells your findings. I don't know what specific objection he's received over the DTI, and that's where it goes to how was it collected, whether the expertise are there, whether the person has actually done DTI before, and it's
right. So there was a follow-up question over there that said, do you recommend walking through the Daubert factors during your expert's deposition?
Absolutely. In fact, I recommend that you go ahead and you put in your expert report.
Good to know.
Yes, absolutely. Because once it's in there, you've locked that in.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, keep going.
All right. So my advice, defeating your Daubert challenge. When it comes to surviving Daubert challenge, the best defense is a good offense. And it goes back to what Kyle just mentioned. Do you get it in your depot? Absolutely. Do you put in your expert report? Absolutely. Why? Because you won this front and center. You're going to go from the beginning knowing that you have to prove it's admissible. You can't rely on the fact that they're going to accept it. You can't rely on the fact there's 20 years of case law saying it's admissible. They're going to fight you on it, and they're going to try to nitpick and find inconsistencies. It is your job to find those inconsistencies and those problems first, address them, and then put your evidence forward. And it's important. Look for expert witnesses who will work best, be a best fit for the facts of your case and for what you're trying to do. Not every expert that you rely on usually will be the right expert for each case. So here's my suggestions to what you need to get your DTI in. You need a radiologist experience with DTI, not somebody who's dabbled on it and somebody who does it or who understands it a little bit. You want somebody who does DTI week in and week out. Younger radiologists are now trained on DTI since they're in med school. They do it in their fellowships, and they even do it in clinical practice. If you can find a radiologist who does this, that is probably one of the best type of radiologists to have for a case like this. I can tell you, because the defense position is the ostrich defense of stick your head in the sand. No, DTI is, witchcraft. We don't believe in it. It's inadmissible. I've never heard of it. It is hardly ever they will hire an expert who is well-versed on DTI. Why? Because that actually makes the DTI easier to be admitted to evidence. There are some defense experts who do DTI, who will opine, but the trend has been to use them less because they feel like it's a stronger position for them to say, nope, no DTI. Yes, they're for scientific purpose. I haven't done DTI. And that's good for you on the plaintiff side. Because just know, when this Daubert challenge happens, you're going to have to take what's called a Daubert deposition of their expert. And you can exploit the fact he doesn't do DTI. He's never done DTI. He's never read DTI. He's never interpreted DTI. He's only read it through literature. Number 2, your standardized replicable technique concordant with the literature. And in case you guys are wondering, all this comes out of a peer review article. It's called a StatPros article. It's available on PubMed. So in case a judge says, well, how do we know this is what it is? Well, judge, there's an actual peer-reviewed medical article on how to do DTI properly for scientific purposes. And again, this goes to this. How did you obtain this DTA data? Okay, you're going to go through a brain scan, and that's going to be standard. Then the question is, this region of interest, those points where you look at those fibers, which specific fibers are you looking at? Do you do a hand tracing technique or a template based? Whatever technique it is, and they're both accepted in the literature, is got to be replicable. Because the one thing you're always going to have in your pocket is say, judge, they can have their expert redo it and see if it comes up with different same numbers. And because their experts don't do DTI, don't read DTI, don't interpret DTI, they're going to have to tell the judge, my expert hasn't done it. I can't tell you that it can be replicated or not. And 3, your database. So DTI gives you the FA values. The FA value is going to be a number between 0 and 1. Okay, what does that mean? Whether it's a 0.2, whether it's a 0.8, whether it's a 0.5. That is why you need a database to compare it to. So if I take a DTI scan of Kyle and his FA values come at 0.4, 0.3, what does that mean? Well, I find a collection of other gentlemen within 10 plus or minus 10 years of his age, similar backgrounds, ethnicity, and I compare that to that database of values. And it gives me a point in a graph as to where Kyle is to see if his values are low or normal. So there's 2 ways to do this. One is a trauma database. So there are some neuroradiologists out there who do some expert work or who have done a lot of expert research on TBI. And they maintain a trauma database. That means they have a list of what the FA values look on people who are known to have a traumatic brain injury. And they can basically say, look, we have a collection here of 30 people who we know have a traumatic brain injury, and their FA values are 0.3 and 0.4. We have Kyle's FA values as 0.3, 0.4. He's within that range. He clearly has a traumatic brain injury. We know that FA value is not what it should be. Probably the more scientific way of doing it is what's called the Normative Database. And for this, you need to go to a research group. And there are some of those who do in the country. And they maintain a database of over 10,000 people. The difference is their database is not based on people who have a traumatic brain injury. It's actually the opposite. They have a database of 1,000 people or 10,000 people who don't have a traumatic brain injury. So I can now take Kyle's FA values and compare them against a group of, again, 30, 40 people, plus or minus 10 years of age from him, and say, we have these 30, 40 people within Kyle's range who don't have a TBI, and their FA values are 0.6, 0.7, Kyle's is 0.3. Clearly, Kyle's values are below what they should be, and that shows that he's got a brain injury. You have a question, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm curious, as you're, as you're immersed in this all the time, and so when you start talking about FA values and fiber tracks and those types of things, to a jury, I'm curious how those things hit, and does the imagery play more of a bigger picture? I know we're talking about a very procedural moment here, but I'm curious how that plays, when you're live in front of a jury.
It absolutely does. Look, the imagery is the crown jewel of what you want to show the jury. If you're there and talking to a jury about FA values and fracture anisotropy and the mathematical formula for it, you're going to be in trouble. What you want to show them is the image, and the image is built as a result of those FA values. That is what you want to do. But to get that in, you're going to have to explain to a judge what the hell is an FA value. Because the defense is going to say, well, judge, they don't know what it is. See, it's witchcraft. And you're going to hear the argument, judge, you take them at 9 a.m., you take them at 10 a.m., they're different numbers. Judge, it's unscientific. Yeah, it's research for group studies, but it's not FDA approved. Nobody uses this in clinical practice. That's not true. They actually do.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this is the hand tracing technique. If you ever wondering what it looks like, this is what it looks like. And as you can see, we have S2, 3, S4, S5, and S6. This is done taking the raw image, putting it into the template in the computer, and then having a technician or a neuroradiologist trace around the areas of interest. That's called the ROI, the region of interest. So they put those little circles and they put a big circle around it. Just so you know, you ever have one of these, looks like that? That area is normally the corpus callosum. Defense gonna say, see, judge, they only did one area of the brain. That's correct. You know why? Because the corpus callosum is the biggest fiber in the brain, and there's an entire body of scientific literature studying fiber tracts and studying FA values in the corpus callosum. Number two, this is what defense lawyers are gonna get sneaky with you. They're gonna say, judge, it was improperly done. Look at it. It's not a very tight tracing. That itself, they include a lot of gray area. So notice this. In your brain, you have white matter and gray matter. Traditionally, the FA values of white matter are higher than of gray matter. So what the defense is going to try to do is say, judge, because they included too much gray matter and it's a weighted average, that brings down the values. They're trying to cheat the system. They're gaming it. It goes back to this. It's important to know if your expert is going to use a hand tracing technique, hey, have you published on it? Is it something that's been published on? Has it been tested? And number two, what software are you using? Because I will tell you this, there are plenty of softwares which actually account for that and say, if the FA value is not above a certain number, we don't even put that into the calculation. And therefore, you can trace it as wide or as narrow as you want. You're only tracing white matter. But that itself is going to open the door. You have to be ready with the defense. You have to be ready at your deposition to have your expert explain which software was used, how it's used, that he's tested it, and that he's done it before. Because otherwise, it's going to open the door and the judge is going to say, well, that does look like it's, very poorly traced. How do I know it's reliable? Especially if you're dealing with a defense-friendly judge. You got to be careful with that. Okay, so this is actually a transcript that comes from one of my briefs that we had to find a case. And the software used was Olea. And the argument that I gave you on the prior image was the same exact argument the defense raised on the Daubert challenge, saying, judge, look how widely they traced it. My 5-year-old does a better job at tracing than that. And they included way too much gray matter. In fact, they even had another expert say, you agree there's gray matter included there? Like, well, yeah, there is. And they use it to say their technique was improper. They have a bad technique, and that's why you have to forget all that body of case law about DTI, and you can exclude this DTI because here their expert didn't use the right technique. And the way we defend it is by looking at the manual itself for Olea, the software. Because what you're looking for is the word background segmentation. What that means is that anything that's not white matter is not counted in the mathematical equation that calculates the FA value. So you can trace as wide or as narrow as you want. It's in the manual. It's not your expert saying, well, that's the way I do it and it's fine. Once you have the manual, they're going to be stuck with it. Now, the best thing they're going to try to do is say, well, maybe they change the settings on it. Okay. Give me evidence of that? Well, no. So make sure you look at the manual. Make sure you ask your expert. When you're interviewing experts, hey, Dr. X, how many DTIs do you do a week? Do you do them just for research purposes or clinical purposes too? Yes. Do you do hand tracing or do you do computer template based? If you do hand tracing, have you published on it? Do you have a standardized technique that follows what the medical literature says on this? And then what software do you use? Does your software have background segmentation? Those are questions you want to ask ahead of time because it's going to tell you talk to the right expert. If an expert you're talking to is telling you, wait, what? I don't know what that is. Oh, yeah, we just use whatever we use. They haven't been through a Daubert challenge. They haven't done this enough, and they're probably not the right expert for your case because they are going to be very, very weak at a Daubert challenge. So remember I told you, when it comes to Olea, at some point, when they follow that Daubert challenge, you're going to have to take a deposition of their expert. And he's going to fight you on it. But Right here comes up right out of our brief. And by the way, this is the brief where we actually got the Daubert admitted. And then also helpified too. With the OLEA calculation, we basically got their expert to admit that as he sat there tonight, he didn't know if gray matter was included or not in the calculation. And all he could say is possible. I defer to the various neuroradiologists who were involved in this case. And then you've asked the follow-up question. Do you have any evidence that the software filter was adjusted? And I promise you, the answer is always going to be, no, I don't. That is what you're going to need. When they attack that hand tracing, you're going to need that testimony from their own expert. Because if their own, clearly you need it from your expert too. If their own expert cannot challenge you on the science, you're already 90% to the end. Because remember, the way that FA values are collected is through this process. This is what real science is. If you can survive the collection of the FA values, you're going to be in a very strong position, because then it all goes back to Dr. X. You don't disagree with the way the science was collected or the way the experiment was done. You're disagreeing with the opinions interpreting the science. And they'll say, well, yes. And again, that is not the matter of Daubert. That goes to weight, not admissibility. Reproduction, we talked about this. Again, out of our brief, you are going to have to ask this question. Doctor, such and such, since you haven't tried to reproduce the hand tracing technique that was done, you don't know whether it's reproducible or not. Reproducible? Yes. No, I don't know. If you only had one tracing, I don't know what second tracing would reveal. No, I don't know. This is where our advantage is. Every time they hire an expert who doesn't do DTI, doesn't read DTI, doesn't process DTI. And you can then take this and go in front of the judge when they say, judge, it's unreliable. I'm like, judge, if it's so unreliable, they can't tell you that. They can't tell you that if you hand trace it again, you won't get the same exact numbers. Because we asked our expert at that position, we deposed him and we asked this question, and he couldn't tell us that running the numbers again, he would come with a different number. It's reproducible. This is not witchcraft. But if you don't ask these questions at your deposition, you're going to be in trouble. So in all states, and this is out of Louisiana, which is most of our practice, there's a case, but almost every state has one, which goes through and admits DTI. And if you don't have one, you can always cite to Louisiana, a very conservative court. It'll give you a good starting point for your research too. It talks about DTI and it explains the principles. Again, it's kind of what I talked about. The way the water moves through fibers of the brain. The way that's projection is trajectories. That is what DTI does. And we can always cite this opinion when you're trying to get your DTI in. However, again, this is a 2014 case. We thought the law was settled, that it was always admissible. There have been some changes. And then this is the new technique they're going to try to use on you. And this comes out of a deposition testimony in a case I had. And what they're going to say is, there is no biomarker. This is what I call the no biomarker defense. And what they're going to tell you is, and they're going to tell the judge, the reason why we don't think DTI should be allowed in a TBI case is because there is no biomarker for DTI. There is no specific finding on DTI that you can say, because you see it that way, it has to be a TBI. And therefore, you cannot diagnose a brain injury with DTI. That actually is true, but you're not diagnosing it. It's a clinical diagnosis. The DTI image simply confirms the clinical diagnosis. But again, the no biomarker defense, be ready for it. It's going to be there. And then we get to what happened in Florida in 2013. Castle v. Orangewood Christian School. And if you do any TBI work, I'm sure you guys have seen this case. It gets thrown on every single brief and it gets attached because this is the order that actually most recently excluded DTI from coming into evidence. And it did so because it bought on the defense argument that DTI is not used for individual basis, it's only for group studies, and that there are no biomarkers. And the opinion itself cites that. So then the question comes up, because sometimes you're not the first person in the case, you get brought in later on. And what happens with DTI? If you have one scan, you're going to face the litany of biomarker defense techniques you're going to have the defense of not scientific, too new, too biased. That's fine. But there are plenty of cases where there isn't just one DTI scan. And that is where things get a little bit hairy. So think about what could happen. So you have one DTI scan with low FA values. Great. Body of literature says low FA values mean TBI. And you get a subsequent scan. Best case scenario, lower FA values. Okay, great. He's getting worse. Well, or you get a subsequent scan years later, and guess what? The values are the same. Okay, he's leveled out, still low. And then sometimes you get the nightmare scenario. You do another DTI scan, and there's a reason why I would always caution you, be careful when you scan people. And the DTI shows high FA values. Whoa, we got a problem now. Why? Because a body of literature that we've all been using for years talks about low FA values. We've been explaining to jurors and judges that judge is a number from 0 to 1. It's like water going in a hose. You know, you put in a gallon of water, you're supposed to get a gallon on the outside. You get less than a gallon, you got a leak somewhere. This pipe is leaking. Well, wait a minute. The values just went up. Does that mean that he's getting better? Does it mean that he's been cured? Does it mean something went wrong? That is a nightmare scenario. That is what we faced, and we survived it. So that's kind of why we're having this chat. Did you have a question, Kyle?
Yeah, we're actually gonna bring Ginger in right here. We're gonna introduce a few of the sponsors, and we'll pick back up.
Sure.
Perfect. And this is going so well. Thank you so much, Hugo, for all of this great information. What I'll do is just take a really quick break right now because I wanted to bring in Ingrid with OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting, another one of our amazing partners. And she's here with us today to share with you guys a little bit more about what they specialize in. Again, Ingrid, thank you and welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be here. And as always, I'm learning so much fascinating material. Many of you have seen me or my colleague Dawn with these connectionology webinars presenting on OnPoint that's been around for about 25 years. We're a team of nurses that work together to help attorneys, both plaintiff and defense, but mostly plaintiff, find experts, do merit screens, do crons and summaries, and pain and suffering reports. I think that one of the things we pride ourselves in, and in listening to this presentation, is finding the right expert. We'd like to have great lengthy conversations with our attorneys when needed for tricky cases like this, to make sure, as Hugo's talking about, that the expert we're locating has been asked these questions, or if the attorney would like to speak to the expert directly, that's always good with us. We often prefer that, and to see a relationship develop there of trust and understanding what's needed, especially going into a deposition or trial. So we're good at lining up experts and making sure they have the experience, such as having studies done and having experience doing whatever procedure it is, whether it's these scans or some surgery or whatever. We can also do the research for you if you feel that that's necessary for whatever kind of case you have. We do pain and suffering cases. We do, reports. I myself manage all the geriatric cases. I'm a master's prepared geriatric nurse. Dawn Montagno, my colleague, manages all of the other expert locations. And then we have a consult part that's also, that's non-geriatric. So, we're here. We're always happy to pick up the phone and have a chat to see what your needs are. We have close relationships with many of our experts so that we make sure you get what you need when you need it. And oftentimes, for no cost, we'll be able to pass things by either us or an expert to see what their thoughts are in the beginning. So again, happy to be here, happy to listen to this and learn, and hope you reach out to us. Thanks, Ginger, as always.
Absolutely. And I hope everybody does too. I hope you will save Ingrid's information. She's going to put it in the chat box for you right now. And also, just to let you know, Ingrid speaks for us frequently on all of our nursing home abuse cases. So you've probably seen her before. Like she said, she's been doing this, over 40 years. And she's extremely responsive. You guys will not be disappointed. John Romano raves about the pain and suffering reports that you guys have. So it's worth the call to stay in touch with her. So thank you, Ingrid, for being with us. And we hope to see you back again very soon. Now I am so excited because we've got Cody Roberts in the house, you guys, and he has been doing amazing work over there at Fox-AE. He's going to share with you guys some of the incredible things that they are doing. You definitely want to make sure you save his information too. So Cody, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks, Ginger. And Hugo, first of all, I have to say, man, that is awesome. And when you say that the visuals are the crown jewel, that's the reason that Vicki and I started this business of science and engineering demonstratives. And your images are absolutely incredible with how vivid they are, but they tell a story. They're purposeful, and then you're showing us also how scientific it is as well. I also had to share some stories about how we use some of our demonstrative exhibits and admissibility practices that I've learned from neuroradiologists and some really good attorneys as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just real quick and show you some of our tactics, if I may. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So this is interesting. What we've got here is on the right side, that is the neuroradiologist. This is an abscess case that the original radiologist missed. And so the expert, the neuroradiologist, outlined for us very clearly, illustratively, right, with that vivid red. He said, okay, this is where the abscess is. And so you say, okay, that's still way not as cool as your DTI images, right, Hugo? But so what we do is we take that and we make it 3D, right? And so, but how do you know it's right? How do you know it's reproducible, right? As you say, Hugo, for the Daubert motions. And so what we did was we took that, what the neuroradiologist made, okay? And we took that, and I'm an engineer by trade, and we made a 3D model. And so this is the abscess. And so you're thinking, okay, that's cool. You know, we see that it's accurate, but does it fully tell the story? And so now, finally, we tell the story. We take that abscess model that the neuroradiologist approved. He was actually in the creation process, and we created it together. We slide those MRIs in, and then we show the gross negligence of the radiologist who missed this completely. Now, granted, what he missed was 3 days prior, and this person had staph, and so the abscess did grow. But what happened was when the abscess grew, it caused paralysis. So if I could just kind of zoom in. So Hugo, when you said, the demonstratives, these vivid pictures are really the crown jewel, that's exactly right. Because it means nothing. The black and white pictures mean nothing to people. But you show them this, and then you show them, yeah, this cut off the spinal cord. This person can't walk. And it shows, and also you fade it into the sagittal view of the MRI. And so this, the neuroradiologist who was the neurosurgeon who was a neutral witness actually said, this is exactly what I saw, and it got admitted as evidence. And it really helped with this case. This was a win. And so, but I just appreciate what you're doing, Hugo, because this is what I get excited about. So.
Fantastic work.
Yeah, I'm extremely impressed. Every time that I hear Cody and I see these images that he's been sharing, I'm like, wow, they're so realistic. They're so good. And I am so appreciative of you being here with us. I hope everybody will save Cody's information. You're going to want to either now or later, but definitely stay in touch with him because he's doing great work over there. Thank you, Cody, for being with us.
Cody, before you go.
Yeah, thank you, Ginger. Thank you, Hugo.
Cody, before you go, could you do that on a DTI scan? built as a 3D model?
Yes, I was just gonna, I was actually gonna ask you that after the meeting, like, because you were showing me different perspectives and I thought,
Right.
okay, this guy has it in 3D somehow. And we can correlate that, take that and plop it into your neuroradiologist report of findings, right?
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Love it. This right now is just reminding me exactly what connectionology is. You're connecting you guys.
That's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much. Let's go ahead. We'll get back to it. But Cody, don't forget to put your information in the chat for everybody. And let's get rolling. We got a lot more to cover.
All right, Hugo, Kyle, who dat? All right.
Thanks.
You guys are from New Orleans. I had to say that. All right. See ya.
All right.
All right, man. We'll get back to it.
Okay, before I start, any questions, Kyle?
No, man. I mean, I'm fired up after I just heard Cody, man. I like somebody who's that passionate about their product. So, yeah, I think we've addressed most everybody's questions. I know we were really kind of getting into the meat of two different, DTI scans being done and what happens when different FA values come in, and this kind of being the crux of why we wanted to bring this to the forefront. So, it's all
Right.
yours, bud.
The nightmare scenario, I like to call it. So let's talk about this for a second. Why do I call this a nightmare scenario? Because with DTI, you have an uphill battle to begin with. You're facing a Daubert challenge. All those things that we talked about, unscientific, unreliable, can't be reproduced, are already there. Add on to this the fact that your new scan now has different numbers, and not off by a little bit. You're talking completely opposite numbers. That is, I mean, the worst situation that can happen. And that is when I got the call about this case, because they did a second scan, the second scan done at a different center, came back, read by a different group with high FA values. And that right there is a personification of what defense lawyer said when he got those reports. Because he was so excited that he was going to exclude DTI. He was going to prove that it was unscientific. And I will tell you, at the hearing on this, his main point was, Judge, I understand the law, but never before have I been able to prove it this clearly, that this is so unreliable, unscientific. The first time where a patient gets scanned twice, and the values dramatically change from being low to high, and not even the same areas of the brain, in different fiber tracts of the brain. So for him, this was the dream case. And he was going to build his entire DTI exclusion portfolio on this case. And they threw everything at us. But we defended it. And let me walk you through a process how you do it. In case you're in the situation, you now know how to do it. This right here, going back to what defense said. It's a funny picture. It is actually straight out of their defense brief, because our position was, yes, we have low FA values. He's got a TBI. Yes, we have high FA values. He's got a TBI. And his position was, Judge, they're playing a game here. High FA values, DTI, TBI. Low FA values, TBI. Which one is it? And when you're the lawyer trying to get DTI admitted and have this situation, your only answer is, well, Judge, it's both. And how do you prove that it's both? And for that, you need to understand and convey to the judge how DTI works, how FA values work. And if you can explain it in a succinct way and ask the right questions at their expert deposition, you can get your DTI admitted even when you have different FA values that are low and high. There's actually another brief. And what they kept arguing is, Judge, they told us years earlier, he's got low FA values, he's got a TBI. And by the way, the literature says those values could very well get lower. And by the way, guess what? The entire body of literature on the prognosis is based on the low FA values. And he got rescanned. And now they are high. And clearly now that proves that this does not meet Daubert, because every time they run it, it's going to be a different number. Every time they get it scanned, those values mean nothing to you. They're constantly fluctuating. So for that reason alone, you should exclude it. and not allowed in front of the jury. So this was our position. So when this happened, here's what we did. We went to the court and said, Judge, we need a hearing and we want to have our expert here. You always want to have your expert testify at the Daubert hearing, but sometimes it's best not to have your expert live. You want to have it in a controlled environment. So we said, Judge, we want to go ahead and have a Daubert hearing on this. And we want to have our experts, testify on the subject. But can we just do Daubert depositions by video and submit that? The way you sell this is, Judge, let me propose something that's going to save you a lot of time and it's not going to interfere with your court schedule. The last thing a judge wants to do is sit through 8 hours of examination, cross-examination, redirect of experts on a highly technical scientific stuff when he's got a busy docket. So the way you sell it is, Judge, this is going to make life a lot easier. Let us take a Daubert deposition, just limited to the Daubert issues of our expert and their expert. And I will take the lead in my expert. They'll take the lead in their expert. They can cross, I'll redirect. Just like we were at trial. If we have objections, we'll put them on the record. You can rule on them. Then you can watch the video. We'll brief the issue. And we can handle it that way. And then we can come to the argument and just argue over the evidence that we already have in the record. Most judges, in my experience, will go for this over having the expert sit there. Of course, that means that if your expert's been deposed, he's going to be redeposed against on Daubert. But that's okay, because it gives you the ability to fix things that you may not have fixed the first deposition. In this situation, the first expert was deposed before the second DTI scan was produced. So there were issues that weren't covered. Also, this is like a video trial. You want to have your expert at his office with all his equipment, with all his material, where he can just simply present the case in the best light possible. This is a mini trial where your expert has to be convincing and has to show he knows what he's doing. A lot of doctors get nervous in the courtroom. They won't have their equipment. They won't have all the right software. You want him in his element. Why? He's going to be more credible. He's going to be better. He's going to have all the material at his fingertips to be able to say, no, let me explain to you why that's wrong. And you're going to take the lead. And for all of us who do litigation work, you work with your experts. This is a whole lot of work. Yes, it is. But high stakes means high amount of work. And you're going to perfect your direct examination. And you're going to do a mock cross. And you're going to make the direct bulletproof on that cross. And you have your redirect ready in case there's something you didn't think about on the cross examination. But once you've seen the Daubert brief, you kind of have an idea what's coming. And then you're going to also request a Daubert deposition of their expert. Why? All those questions I showed you earlier, but we got their expert to admit that he didn't do the DTI. He doesn't do DTI. He doesn't know if it's a different number, that he can't tell you what software they use. It's hugely important, because otherwise a defense lawyer can get up there and make up stories and create innuendo and say, Judge, see, the tracing does like this. And then it's your expert say, no, it's fine. But when their own expert can't stand up and say, that's improperly done, it's very, very powerful. And it is another way to get your Daubert challenge defeated. Why? Because it shows their own experts, Judge, don't know about DTI. The reason why they're telling you this is because their experts don't do it. And you're going to brief the hell out of the issues. Pick the 3 top issues as to why your DTI should be admissible, and you're going to walk them through the process. You're going to basically, in your deposition, list out all the elements. You're going to walk them through the process, how it's done, how it's collected, and how it's scientific. And you're going to attach the literature. Again, hand tracing, which was happening in this case, we had a body of literature where our expert had published on the same exact process of hand tracing in a bunch of conferences, and we attached that. So those are the keys to when this happens.
I'm curious, as you're going through this, if you're going to use advanced neuroimaging like DTI or SWI, is it is it a foregone conclusion that you're going to run into these challenges? So you need to be prepared accordingly, or, is it something that comes up every now and then, or is it just prevalent when you're talking about, traumatic brain injury cases?
I can't think of a single TBI case where I've been involved in the last probably 10 years where there has not been a Daubert challenge on the neuro-advanced imaging. It's coming every single time. And it sort of makes sense why they do it. Again, it goes back to what we talked earlier. The image is so powerful, you have to take a shot at getting it out. You might know you're likely to be unsuccessful, but if you do, that is going to be detrimental to the plaintiff's case. When you're the defense, you want to point to the fact this gentleman looks fine, this lady looks fine, they're normal, they're just simply complaining about symptoms. Nobody can see inside their brain. By the way, in a mild TBI case, most of the times is, they did a CT scan at the hospital at best, and it's negative. So the 3T MRI came back negative. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this person's brain. The DTI is going to be more sensitive. That's what's going to pick up more things. But that is why you are going to see a challenge on that.
Well, it's like you talked about. I mean, it's part of the puzzle that you're ultimately putting together. This is just a piece of being able to correlate and verify, hey, this matches the symptoms.
Correct. And it goes back to being the crown jewel because it's very visually appealing and it shows a look inside the brain. And again, those little things you see coming out of this mohawk, those are fiber tracks. Those are the signals coming out from the brain. I am being able to show a jury that this brain is not healthy and it's not even complete anymore. It is washing away like the wetlands.
So I know one of the things that's come up from time to time that I hear is always when to image, when to do these kinds of things. And now you're talking about, hey, I had a scan done, here, and then 2 years later it's here. So I'm sure that's a question for people out there.
It always is a question, and there's plenty of experts, mostly radiologists, who will tell you, well, image early and image late. And the problem with that is this: at some point, you have to make a decision on your case. If you image too soon, we know from the literature that a brain injury is a molecular injury. It doesn't happen immediately. What you need is cell death to happen. And if you bump your elbow against the table, you don't get a bruise that second. No one shows up the next day. The brain is no different. So it just takes about 3 months for it to show in an image. You have to be careful. If you image too soon, you might get nothing. And then you're stuck in a situation where symptoms persist. And then how can you explain the symptoms? And your physiatrist, your neurologist can tell you, there's a brain injury here. I can tell you this. The symptoms are related to that. But then how do you show it to a jury?
Sure.
And that's when the issue comes up. Do you scan again? Now, it happens sometimes that the first scan doesn't meet the right protocols. They didn't do it right. So you need a second scan. Because you know what the defense is going to do? They're going to want to say that both scans are wrong and they didn't meet the protocols. So I am a big believer you scan within the 6-month period and then you don't rescan unless there's a really good reason to do so.
Got it.
Now, if you look, like I said, if you scan and you get consecutive MRIs that show more decreased FA values, great. But what happens if you don't? Now you got to be go in front of a judge and explain to him why your low and high FA values both mean TBI. And the answer is that it does, but it's not intuitive.
Understood.
All right. So let's see, share my screen again. So when you go to court, right here, anybody who wants to be really smart in front of a judge, show them the DTI formula. That is how it gets converted from the film to the actual fiber tracks and the calculation of whether a number from 0 to 1. I will tell you this, you show this to a judge, he's not gonna know what to do with it. And by the way, it looks confusing, it looks difficult, and you wanna make it intuitive. This is probably what I say the worst way to try to explain DTI to a judge or a jury. When you say, well, judge, let me tell you, it's really simple. The science is clear. You run this mathematical formula and it gives you the FA values. And in my case, they came out low the first time and they came higher the last time, but it's all TBI anyway. Doesn't make sense. This is what I do. I like this diagram. It comes from the medical literature. And what I like to do is I'll say, Judge, let me explain to you how DTI works. And let me tell you why both having low FA values and high FA values are both proof that there's a traumatic brain injury in this person. And I say, Judge, it's very simple. The way DTI works is that it measures the rate of flow of these water molecules. We know that water alone moves in any kind of wild direction it wants to. We know when you put a straw to it, it tries to follow that line. But it's never going to be at the fastest rate. It's going to be somewhere in the middle between 0 and 1. Now, when it's decreased, for example, look at the little picture under C. It means those fiber tracks are broken, which means the water is moving more and more randomly. That's why it's a low number, almost getting close to 0. However, when there's swelling and those fiber tracks get really tight, it's going to move faster. Why? Because instead of there being one track, now it's almost like there's 2 tracks. That is what I'm telling you, Judge. This is the same as trying to say, and bring an analogy in place. Somebody has low blood pressure, they have a condition. Somebody has high blood pressure, they have a condition, means their body can't properly regulate things. They're supposed to be in the middle. So the fact that somebody has low FA values and high FA values are both consistent with a TBI. In fact, the most likely explanation for why somebody has high FA values is that they're swelling. And if you really want to get scientific, one of the theories as to why this happens in TBI is called remyelination. When a cell basically dies or gets hurt, it tries to scar and heal itself. But brain cells aren't really good at that. And therefore they rescar and rescar and rescar and they become extra thick. And that is why you get those higher FA values. And to me, that is the way we're able to show the judge why it made sense that both the high and the low FA values were consistent with a brain injury by using this image right here and walk the judge through every single step. Remember, we talked about this earlier. Once you can prove that the DTI was obtained in a very scientific way, the hand tracing or the computer template method, then you can get, this is your last question. I always save it to the end, and this is always what finishes my brief, because remember, the Romans always remember the last thing they hear. To their expert, let's talk about the collection of data. Do you disagree that the raw images from DTI show the FA values that are listed in the report? Answer, no, I don't disagree with that unless those are numbers that the software generated. So it does not disagree with how. So then you show the judge, he doesn't disagree with how the data was collected. He doesn't disagree with how this FA numbers came about. What he disagrees is the interpretation. And remember, Daubert is focused on the science. Can you reproduce this experiment? Can their expert take your expert's experiment and say, yes, I can reproduce it? Daubert is not concerned with the opinions derived out of the experiment. That goes to the weight of the evidence. When you can get that question out and you can prove this to the judge, you are outside the Daubert danger zone and you're more likely to win your Daubert challenge and you're not going to get excluded. But remember, you want to, as you're preparing your case, focus their expert on the collection of the data. How did these numbers come about? How is it that the FA values are 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4? You want to focus there. They want to focus on the fact that, there's no biomarker and that the literature is all over the place and, it's too new. You want to focus on the science. You want to focus on the way this data was collected, the way the experiment was done. I will tell you this, you can't really game the system on DTI. The plaintiff can't game it, and the radiologist, the numbers are computer generated. The values are what they are. It really comes down to the opinions. But when people try to fall into the trap of, well, judge, the literature says this on TBI and DTI and TBI and the correlation between the two, you're now playing to the defense hand. You want to bring the argument back to the science. How was the data collected? We collected it this way. The method is sound. And their expert's going to have to say, I don't have a disagreement how the data was collected. Yes, that's the right way to collect data. I have a disagreement on the opinions, how you interpret it. That is where you want to fight this fight, not on the TBI, DTI literature. And hopefully at the end, you end up with something like this, which is basically the judgment that says, the motion is denied on the TBI. Now, I will tell you this, you don't want to be in this fight. It's a hard fight to fight. It's dangerous. It always, makes my stomach turn. But if you can take anything away from this, is that you have to know from the beginning, you are going to prove your case from depositions, from reports, from anything else you have, because that challenge is going to come. And when that challenge comes, you have to be ready to meet it. And if you do it right, if you make sure that the expert has the right experience on it, that the expert does it every single day, that he's published on this method, that the software that he uses has that filter, then you are very likely to get your DTI admitted. So I know somebody asked a question earlier that he has problems admitting DTI. If that person's still around, I'd like to know what exactly is his problem admitting it, and to see if this addresses that. Kyle, I don't know if you can reach out to them or not.
Yeah, we'll shoot him a private message and see if we can get him to answer.
Okay. So
Right.
Kyle, do you have any other questions?
We've answered most of the questions as we've run along, and kind of kept a pretty interactive dialogue about everything that's been going on. So I don't think we have any questions at this time. I know Ginger was going to bring in somebody else to kind of help wrap us up. And for those of you who don't know, again, all of the information that is being provided right here, you can certainly reach out to Hugo directly. He's very accessible. I know he's very busy, but we did provide his email address earlier in the chat box, and I know Ginger will probably share it again. And for our part of it, at HMR, everything that we provide to lawyers like Hugo and everybody who's been a part of Connectionology has been funding these types of things, whether it's the DTI scan or a basic, appointment with a physiatrist, all the way to the actual cognitive rehab that most of these people need. And as we've segued and grown as a company, we've gotten into a lot of funding the actual experts that are needed to prove these kinds of things. So whether it's you need a funding for a life care planner or some of these experts that are required for trial, we're certainly there to help. And it's been a blessing to be able to work with so many great trial lawyers through Connectionology. So Ginger, we'll turn it over to you. I know you want to bring somebody in, and we'll start to try to wrap it up.
Absolutely. And honestly, Kyle, I cannot thank you enough, and HMR, for all the incredible things that you guys do for us here at Connectionology and all of our attorneys that watch this. Not only have you guys been helping us out with these webinars since the very beginning, but you've been helping us with our seminars, our live seminars, which have started launching again. Our Nashville seminar, which was so much fun earlier this year, just a couple months ago. We're doing it again. It's already on our website, and registration is going to be live in probably a couple of days, but it's going to be back bigger and better than ever. And we're so happy to have you guys be a part of that. And that's our TBI seminar that we do. But coming up, we've got Jackson Hole, which is going to be at the end of September. We've got a one-day seminar we're going to be doing in Savannah, Georgia. So lots of fun stuff. And I want to say thank you to everybody watching for supporting everything that we do here. We really appreciate it. But big thanks, Hugo. This is an incredible presentation that you did today. And I am already looking forward to the next one. I'm going to bring in Kyle. Let's see, I'm going to bring in Ted in just a few moments because he's going to do the coffee giveaway. But I wanted to at least go ahead and share with you guys the contact information for Kyle and Hugo and our incredible partners over at Fox-AE and OnPoint Legal Nurse Consulting. Please plan on staying in touch with them. I'm going to email this to you in a few moments, as well as a copy of Hugo's slides. So you can refer back to, and then we will be posting this to our YouTube channel after the webinar today. Be sure to go ahead and check out all of our other great webinars. There's a lot of ones that we've done, Kyle, with you and HMR in the past on TBI, which are really, really good. And feel free to subscribe. So I will email this to you guys, but let me go ahead and bring in my good buddy, Ted, who's going to do the coffee giveaway. And we're all waiting to see who the winner is. And don't forget, if you didn't win today, there's more chances next week. If you go to connectionology.com, you can sign up for the next webinar that we have. But Ted is going to join us in just a moment. There he is. Ted, thank you for being with us today. We're so excited to have you. Can you please do the honors and let us know who the winner is?
Yeah, sure. I'm excited to announce it is Rob Cantu out of Houston, Texas, is the big winner today. So congratulations.
Congratulations. All right,
Yeah.
Rob. Well, Ted, it looks like both of us, we will reach out to Rob in a few minutes and make sure that he gets all of this great copy, but you're definitely going to enjoy it. I've heard all the past winners enjoy it. And we thank you again for doing this special giveaway for us, Ted.
You're welcome.
Do you have any events coming up that we all need to be aware of?
Oh, I don't think that we've got, I mean, we all just came off of Lanier. I know we're looking forward. I think we're all going to see John at the Colorado Trial Lawyers meeting in Denver in a couple of weeks at the beginning of August. And then looking forward to obviously all the live seminars that you all are going to be putting on. So we're excited about it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, if you guys have any last minute things, now's the time to share it. Hugo, do you have any closing comments?
Nothing for me, just good luck. Look at your experts carefully and best of luck with your DTIs.
Perfect. Well, amazing job today. Thank you guys so much for being with us. I hope everybody watching has a great remainder of your afternoon. Be in touch. I will be sending you some great information. We'll see you guys soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.